This is the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Revitalizing the world together. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is your host, Neil Collins, and I am eternally grateful, as always, that you're tuning in to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast to get inspiration, education, and just listen to what we're doing with the emerging field of regenerative real estate. You know, the ability to understand that we are living in a world that is by no means sustainable, and there are a lot of forces against it, but the ability to go out and connect with thought leaders from across the industry, and now with today's interview with Martin Brown, across the world onto different continents, is just, it's so impactful for me. I love having these conversations every single week. If I miss a week because we've got a lot going on with our world at Latitude, I can really feel it. You know, I don't get that same endorphin release. I don't get that same mental rush of being able to connect with practitioners that are truly doing some amazing work. And Martin, what is so cool about his story is that he takes his background in decades worth of construction, he infuses his life experiences of growing up a little bit more closer to nature, and his travels in the Himalayas and in the Scouts whenever he was a young guy. And over time, he's been able to really change the direction of his thinking and his practice. And now he is making impacts on projects from across Europe. He's been an instrumental person in helping to get the influence of the International Living Future Institute outside of Seattle, outside of the West Coast of the United States, and into Europe and beyond. So it's amazing to connect with Martin. It is a theme that I'm finding with the regenerative real estate space, as well as with our company Latitude, is that it's not just people that are tuning in locally. It is people that are tuning in from across the world. And it's just so cool to see that what we are really jiving on, what energizes us, is also energizing other people. And I want to know what you're thinking about and what's getting you up in the morning. And I want to know how you want to take these ideas and these thoughts and apply it into your own world, or onto your own real estate project, or into your own house. That is what's so cool. So I really do encourage you to join the Facebook group Regenerative Real Estate. We've got a brand new publication called Regenerative Real Estate on medium.com. You can go and search for that and follow it. And if you're interested, become a contributor, become a writer, because there is no better way to flex your impact than by flushing out your thoughts, putting it down in black and white, and sharing it with the world. Because that's what we're doing with this podcast. That's what we're doing with our Facebook group. And that's what we're doing with our Medium publication. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you get a lot out of this conversation. It was a really fun one to record. And stay tuned. If you can, leave us a rating and review on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you're getting your podcast, and enjoy. Everybody, welcome back. I am really excited about this conversation. This is the first podcast that we are actually going across the continent, across the Atlantic. And we're talking with Martin Brown. Martin, thanks so much for taking the time. Tell everybody where you are right now.
Hi, Neil. Well, yeah, absolutely delighted to join you, and thanks for the invitation to have this conversation. So, yeah, I'm based in the UK. I'm based in northwest England, in an area called the Forest of Bowland, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty. And this has been home now for 25 years, and it's a place I really love, and a place I now have putting down roots. People ask me whereabouts in the UK is that, particularly people from the US, and the closest major town is Manchester. So that puts me on the map there in, as I say, northwest England. Yeah.
Okay. I've got a fair recollection of where that is. We spent some time working out of York in Wales, and it was amazing to go travel around, see the different regions, and really the different bioregions and dialect regions. And and all of that. And Martin, reading your background, you have such an interesting story. The format of the show, I really like to dive into the backstory because I like uh, the sum of the parts, um, or the experiences create the sum of the parts. And you are a sustainability provocateur, and you have helped create a lot of amazing regenerative and sustainable movements. But where do you come from, and how did you end up where you are now? And take as much time as you want to get there.
Yeah, well, that's a long story, isn't it? Yeah. I guess the short story is I see my career being in three parts. One was in mainstream contracting, partially in the US, but mostly in the UK. The second part was in business improvement, again working for a mainstream contractor. And then the last part has been in consultancy or provocateuring. We'll get to that in a moment. So yeah, that last part is when I really could dive down into sustainability. It took a while, but now I feel, I am where I needed to be for most of my career. And so
it looks like you did a lot of adventuring. Sorry, oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to go really to you did a lot of adventuring in your youth. What was the spirit that called you into that? Was that something that your parents raised you with?
Yeah, I guess it was the father who encouraged me to get into scouting back as a young teenager, and that was great. That just opened up the whole outdoors for me. Whether it was camping, whether it was woodcraft, whether it was out walking, climbing in the local area. I grew up in the south of the UK, in a place called Bristol, just outside Bristol, and that was wonderful. And scouting gave me that sort of foothold and foundation to move on to bigger outdoor adventures. So walking, climbing in the Alps, a bit in the Himalayas, mostly in the UK, in Scotland, going underground, going as high as I could. And in those days in those days of my career, looking back, it was about adventure. It was about challenging the mountains. It was about conquering the mountains, etc. Now it's about experiencing being in the mountains, experiencing nature, being outdoors. And I think that there's a parallel there with construction. The early days in construction was to be involved in the biggest and the most difficult construction project. Now it's about the nuances of construction, where the materials are coming from, what the impact will be. And we'll move on to the whole regenerative side of that, and ILFI and Living, Build and Challenge. But there's that sort of parallel from wanting to conquer the mountain and be brash and go for it, to where we are today, which is a more, as I say, nuanced approach to that.
What was when you got into contracting, what year was that, and how did you end up in the built environment?
By accident, actually. Way back then, we had careers officers in the grammar school I attended, and I had a fascination with mapping and cartography. So at that stage, at the age of 15, 16, wanted to be a cartographer or a geologist of some sort, or a geographer of some sort. The careers advisor said, "We've got just this job for you. It's known as a quantity surveyor. I'm sure they do surveying." So signed up, went along to the interview, managed to get the job with a contracting company. And it was probably only in the first week of starting, I realized it was a totally different type of surveying. It's more of an accountant. Quantity surveying is a role which is unique to the UK contracting. And I know you use accountants to do the same thing, measuring materials, forming evaluations, managing payments, etc. So I got into construction by accident, but started to enjoy it and really did enjoy that. In fact, there's a story I often show. The first few weeks of starting in construction, we had a number of power cuts, outages here in the UK due to a number of industrial strikes and industrial relations. So the first few weeks, we were working on site with zero electricity. So we were trying to do the office work by candlelight, which just seems bizarre now. It's a great start into construction. And from there, moved from quantity surveying and moved into site engineering, so that the setting out of buildings, etc., and then into management, picking up a degree along the way. I left school at GCE level, which is not sure how that equates to the US. Left school at the age of 15, and then went back to university at the age of 19, 20, and I followed an academic career for 4 or 5 years. So yeah, that was all good fun. And during the time of being at university, I managed to arrange an exchange visit across to Boston, and ended up working in construction with a contracting company just outside Boston, and that was brilliant. It was wonderful construction. I was no longer a student. I was a superintendent from day one, so that was a big leg up. But at the time, had a real fascination with West Coast music and UK music, but the West Coast music with Jackson Browne and the Eagles. And there they were performing. This was late 70s, so it was the height of that type of performance. So it was just wonderful to listen to those in Boston.
And how did you end up? I see by the 80s, you were an expat in the Caribbean. That seems like a bit of a right turn.
Yeah, I came that came about not by accident. I think these things are sort of planned by someone. I mentioned I did some Himalayan trekking. We were trekking across just outside Kathmandu, and I received a letter because I'd left a forwarding address for the Kathmandu post office with a construction company, Kia, who I applied for a job for. So I picked up the letter from the post office in Kathmandu to say that, we've got a posting for you. Would you be interested in going out to Trinidad? So the next stop from the post office was to go to a library, pick up a huge atlas and work out exactly where Trinidad was. You sort of know it somewhere in the Caribbean, but is it in the Windies or wherever? And a couple of months later, I found myself in Trinidad as a site agent and then project manager.
That's incredible.
And I think there's a number of stories which sort of come around again. And I was talking to someone just this afternoon about setting up a program of Latin American regenerative speakers. And one of those will come from Trinidad and Tobago. Linda Singh, who's the ambassador there in Trinidad. So I like all these things which are coming around again.
It's funny how you can really look at your life experiences and you can see how there's these often parallels from your past. And why I love to get into really understanding where you're coming from is that we've taken a lot of different left and right turns in our career, certainly from studying whale sharks in the Maldives and in the Peace Corps in Eastern Europe. But one of the themes that I found with this show that you fit in really nicely is that a lot of the people that are talking about sustainability and regeneration, they had such a deep exposure to the outdoors in their youth. I mean, for you, it was scouting with other designers or architects. They might have had a 4-H experience with Al Tozer that did the first residential living building challenge. And without that, I don't know too many very urban based upbringing professionals that are really leading the charge in what I think is the future of real estate. At what point did you start to shift out of I'm doing contracting work to really start thinking about sustainability?
Yeah, I guess it was when I got back to the UK, we started a family. At the same time, I had progressed to a senior project manager and was running large projects here in the UK, 50 to 100 million type projects. This would have been mid to late 80s into the 90s. And I realized that wasn't for me then, that whole absorption which project needs and the commitment to be there 24/7. So I looked for another route whilst being in construction, and an opportunity came along to move into business improvement. or initially it was quality, and then environmental management, and then business improvement, and then total quality management. So that sort of grounding of all those things and looking at things differently, problem solving. And I took a couple of major contracting companies through the ISO standards of environmental management and quality management. And I realized at the time that they were quite lacking in terms of sustainability. They were just about reducing impact rather than making real progress and making real positive impact. But it took a while. It probably took another 10 years or so before I could move out of main contracting and start my own business, my own consultancy, to actually really push that forward. But I think it was that jump from project management into business improvement. And at the time, total quality management was the buzz within project management. That whole idea of, as I say, problem solving just opened up so many doors. It was wonderful.
What's the methodology? What's the broad overview of how do you actually bring a company that may not be thinking in any way, shape, or form sustainability? Because it may be a lot easier now because people are seeking that out. Yeah. But in the 90s, I would imagine it's few and far between.
Absolutely. And it was environmental management rather than sustainability. So we were concerned about pollution. We were concerned about construction companies, polluting the local river course, etc. I guess through my career as a consultant, I've worked with companies who get it, rather than spending too much energy on really turning people around. I've never advertised my services as a consultant in terms of marketing. I do so by being visible, by being around social media. And you mentioned various rabbit holes you disappeared to it, but what's checking out my locations across the web. But by being visible and sharing these things and linking people together with others who are doing it and showing the examples of what's possible, that's the way I've done it. Rather than try and really persuade people, they need to change. And you're quite right. Things are very different now. People are coming back and say, "You talked about this 5-10 years ago. You better come back and talk to us again," which I really like. And it's that idea of sowing a seed. Sow the seed, let it mature, keep an eye on it from time to time, and then there's that expression, isn't it? When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. That might sound a bit grand, but it does work. There's something in that.
So you've come into it from a green movement to a sustainability movement. Now there's an emergence of a regeneration movement. What do you really see as the difference there? What's the vision that you and other people that are linking arms are pushing for right now?
Yeah, I think it is regenerative, as you say. That's the key. And people are moving from business as usual. And it's that ISO approach that we mentioned a moment ago of tick box mentality, just doing this because we need a certificate of sorts. Moving through green, moving through sustainability, and just linking so many things together into the regenerative paradigm, if you like. And regenerative picks up the environment, nature. It picks up all the personal and the society and the culture and the place. And we'll move on to living, build, and challenge pretty quickly now, I think. But that starts to frame what regenerative is all about. Really.
Do you think that you can have regeneration without restoration or really sustainability?
I think it's a complicated or complex process, but it is a linear process. So you move from sustainability through restorative through to regenerative. And I've always liked a quotation from Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, etc. Said we shouldn't be using the word sustainability until we give it back as much as we take. As much as we take from nature, as much as we take from the environment, and from the people that work with us. So for me, that sustainability is a tipping point where we move from doing negative impact, to doing positive impact. But then we need to go a stage further. And I've used the expression of healing the future quite a few times. Yeah, we need to start repairing some of the damage we've done, particularly in construction. So that takes us into restorative, where we start to restore the ecosystems. We start to restore natural systems, which we are part of. And once we've restored them, then we can move into the regenerative, which enables society, and enables communities and nature, the natural systems, to thrive. We've created the conditions and seen ourselves as part of that ecosystem, where the whole system starts to thrive. I'm getting tangled up in my own words here, but I think you get the picture there. And many people think we would be far better without having the word sustainability in the context that we use it as meaning green, and it's I think it's given us given many something to hide behind, to say we're sustainable without actually having to progress so far. And I often use the Brundtland definition. Go back to 1987 with the Brundtland definition of doing nothing today to compromise tomorrow's generation. And yet we all put that into our sustainability visions and policies, etc. And it's on our website. It's still on most people's website, most companies' website. And yet we know we are compromising generations, and we continue to do so. We need to move into a new side of mindset where we're looking at things differently, which is that regenerative mindset.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to slip into a sustainability mindset where nothing else changes, but certainly a lot of greenwashing occurs, or companies, they can alter their packaging and now consider themselves sustainable, but it doesn't change any personal behavior on people. Maybe they're going to use this brand over that brand, but no underlying change is really going on. To where what's really sunk in with regeneration for me is that every single one of our actions and decisions can go to create a better future instead of detract from it, or even try to keep the status quo. Because coming from an ecological background, what you see is our baseline shift over time to where we don't even realize that what once was, we may think it's the same, but it in no way, shape, or form is the same.
Exactly. And I picked up on a Sanskrit word to start to describe that mindset that we need to move to, and that's a Sanskrit word of seva, which I think it roughly translates as being in service to others without reward, and doing things because it's the right thing to do. So if we start to see ourselves as part of nature, we can move into that mindset, because we don't need to call it sustainability. We don't need to call it regenerative. We do it because it's the right, responsible thing to be doing. And I do like that approach, and try to encourage people to move to there. So you don't need spreadsheets and checklists and everything to prove that we're sustainable. It's what we do.
What do your clients say about that? Are you working with mainly businesses in the built environment, or are you working across the spectrum?
I'm working across the built environment spectrum. Yeah. So I'm working with smaller contractors, and I'm working all the way through to major developers. They are those organizations that get this. They might not get the mindset and the seva concepts, but they certainly get the different way of looking at things.
One of the interesting things with contracting in particular, especially because they're pitching projects, or they're pitching their services, and whenever they're going to people that are not thinking, and hey, I want to make this impact, it's almost like the contractor is going to find that people are wanting this. They want to do the right thing. They already know what's possible, that no other route exists for them. And now they just have to figure out how they're going to do it. Or the contractor is good enough to say, to really build the case where the client walks out of there saying, there's no other route but to build this direction. And so where in this timeline did you really start linking up with organizations like the International Living Future Institute, that I think is definitely one of those organizations that's a thought leader in regenerative design and development?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, stumbling across ILFI was through social media, through Twitter, and I think that was 2011. Stumbled across a group of folk who were at an own conference. I believe it was in Portland, and this was the ILFI's own conference. And here was a group of folk who were talking about the same sort of things we were talking about. And at the time, I was supporting an organisation at Leeds Beckett University here in the UK, known as Green Vision. And through Green Vision, we said, we need to bring Living Building Challenge here to the UK, and we have. And over that first year or so, we invited people to join us via Skype, and just share what they were doing. So these were architects who were working on projects like the Bullet Centre, like just our Desert Rain, which we heard about in an earlier podcast series. So architects just joined us remotely by Skype, and that started to create then the first UK collaborative of like-minded folk. We invited Amanda Sturgeon over, who launched the collaborative. I think it was about 2013, 2014. And then Jason McKellen came over a couple of years later. So slowly we've been ramping up and that's led to the first Living Building Challenge project here in the UK, which is a stone's throw from where I am at the moment. So that's.
And what kind of project is that? Was it a commercial project or residential?
No, it's a visitor centre in a country park. So it's park cafe, park visitor centre classrooms, and park office for the park rangers.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
And it is in many ways a unique building. It's designed by Barbara Jones, a Straw Bell architect and leader in these things. But effectively, it's a plant-based building. So we've got a Straw Bell construction. We've got timber frame construction. Most or a lot of the timber was harvested locally in the country park. And zero cement and zero concrete. So that's a nice USP.
Why did they go with straw bale?
The park themselves wanted a unique, sustainable building. They didn't know about Living Building Challenge. They didn't know about straw bale, etc. But they wanted something which was environmentally good to suit their image as being part of a country park.
And it met full Living Building certification?
It's going through that at the moment. It's going through the proving period. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it's a relatively new project.
Yes, it opened 18 months or so ago. Okay. And I think I was thinking about what we were going to talk about this afternoon, but in terms of regenerative thinking, one angle on regenerative is what that particular building, that one building has done for the park. It's been incredibly successful as a cafe in terms of retail and turnover, but it's increased the footfall to the park by 4. So they have 4 times more people attending. And I think they know through various surveys they've done, they're coming to see the visitor centre or to take a coffee and then go for a walk. And every time I visited since it's been open, it's been, well, apart from the lockdown COVID period, but it's been really busy. And there's been a really nice buzz there. And talking to people there, they sense this is a very different building. It's a nice, clean air. It's breathable. It's clean. And of course, it's red list free, so there's no toxics. There's no off-gassing going on anywhere. and people just love the building.
To have 4 times the foot traffic is insane. You know, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it's going to cost a lot more to do this, and we've really got to make the business sense. But you stumble across examples like this of, hey, we've got 4 times the foot traffic, or our building has a 300-person waiting list for a flat. Here's our rental rates or our lease rates on commercial offices. And it's so compelling. And we're not even talking about the environmental impact, the health and well-being impact on our people, the ecological impact, where there's actually more positive externalities going on.
Exactly. And so go back to the question earlier, how do you persuade people this is the right thing to do? It's all these things. It's the experience of designing, the experience of contracting. That's also the benefits to the business at the end of the day.
Where are you seeing the capacity in the UK, in Europe? Is it okay? Like, can you even lump the UK in with Europe?
Yes,
or there's 2 very different things going on right now?
Politically, there's 2 very different things going on, of course, with Brexit. And in theory, no, in practice, we are no longer part of the EU. We have left. And the transition period finishes in January of next year. But for all intents and purposes, we are still part of the European continent geographically. And so many of the things we're doing are linked still.
And specifically with the built environment, where do you see that going down a path? I mean, in the US, we always say that Europe is far in front of us in many different ways.
Yes, that's an interesting perspective, because sometimes we see it the other way around as well. That we see wonderful things happening across in the States in terms of the built environment, in terms of architecture, like the Bullitt Center and the other wonderful projects that you have there. But there's a lot of activity here in the EU. We've just started the Living Future Europe, which is an LFI based in Europe. We have a very healthy Living Building Challenge bunch of ambassadors and collaboratives around Europe. In fact, we're all coming together for the first time, hopefully in December, COVID permitting. So we're looking forward to our first conference. And there's a number of projects starting to emerge across Europe, either in design and construction, and there's a residential project from Manuela down in Spain, which it's his own home, which he's now living in. So that's here in the UK, there's 2 or 3 projects in design, and there's another in construction. These are Living Building Challenge projects in design, and there's one in construction.
Wow, it's great to hear that it's picking up steam there. And I think one of the reasons why we look to Europe, or at least maybe this is just me looking to Europe, but I look at the amount of toxic chemicals that we know are harmful to our environment, to our health, and out of thousands, only 5 are banned by our government for use. Where in Europe, it's tens of thousands or maybe not that high, but it's certainly a more prohibitive list of what you cannot put into a building that will certainly impact our human health.
Yeah. Across Europe, we have a number of legislative approaches like REACH and a few others, which prohibit some of the materials which can go into buildings, but they still get there in lesser qualities, etc. And with the Curtin Valley project, the one here in the UK, and with the other project, the materials aspect, the red list aspect, has been the most challenging.
So
the suppliers of those materials just probably don't know what the ingredient list of what they're supplying. So when they're challenged, does your product meet the red list? There's a bit of a hands up. Sorry, we don't know. So not quite a take it or leave it, but it's a challenge to get to that. And I'm starting to see that transparency sort of fan out from Living Building Challenge projects, with others picking up the red list for good reasons, because the materials are harmful in production, or the way they're extracted from the ground, or the way they're made in production, the way they're incorporated into the building by the contracting, and then of course in the life of the building. So those developers, those contractors we were talking about, those the ones that get this agenda, are starting to prohibit those. But it is a challenge.
Certainly, and I think that's really the area that I congratulate IFLI on the most. I mean, you can get a lot of different architects and designers in a room to be on board with this, but unless they have a resource list, and unless you've got the manufacturers on board that are willing to take on the critical thinking and understanding their impact, which you can expend a lot of brain hours and trauma, brain trauma, to do that. If you don't have that, this movement doesn't go very far.
Absolutely. But you know, I think things have matured over the last 3 to 5 years in terms of material transparency. Yeah, we're in this so-called woke period where we've been woken up to so many things at the moment, and I think we're now far more aware of the impact of where materials are coming from, and the impact of using those materials. And I think back only over that 3-5 year period when you were talking about, we can't use formaldehyde, we can't use some of the other red list things, and people would look at you, well, why not? We've always used it. I like that fresh smell of a new building, the fresh smell we get when we get a brand new automobile. Now we realize, well, actually, that's bad. That's bad for us. Let's try and get that out of our lives, out of our buildings. And that's probably the same in a home. We don't want those things in the home anymore. Although we're going through a bit of a interior redecoration here where I'm living, and actually to find eco carpets, eco wallpapers, eco paints, etc., is not as easy. You have to go out of your way to do it. I had a fantastic conversation with the local carpet supplier. A local town, and I wanted to keep things local, so just popped in to see what they had in terms of the toxic-free carpets, and it was though I was talking about from another planet. The guy had never sold any non-toxic carpets. He said, I could probably source you some from the internet, but it would take me a few weeks. So you realize what's masonry contracting, masonry buildings maybe have got toxicity, and it's on the agenda. In terms of the retail market for construction, it certainly isn't.
What do you think it's going to take to get people more aware and to push that side of the industry?
Well, I think one of the things will be people like me, people like you in real estate, because we're doing this within our business life, we'll take it into our personal life, and we'll be knocking on the door of the local carpet shop in the local town and say, do you have any of this? Can you get this? I think this is really important. In Future Restorative, the book, I used a chart called the long tail of construction, and this is sort of taken from. I'll check the quote, but it's the long tail of commerce, the long tail of retail. But effectively, there's more activity within that long tail in small construction projects, DIY projects, than there is in all the big projects at the end of the tail. So if we were to make a tipping point, it's getting people to realize that what they're doing by buying a carpet, what they're doing on that local few dollar or few $100 conversion project is as important as the big projects in New York City or the bullet center of many million. Because if we can get all those small projects doing the right thing, that's going to be the one of the big tipping points.
Certainly. And I was actually in a conversation earlier today with a family member about, they're worried about masks and COVID and the pandemic that's going on. And what strikes me as so funny is we're ignoring the pandemics that have been raging around us with our health degrading, that we've got cancer rates skyrocketing, heart conditions going through the roof, autoimmune diseases. They're now saying that that's more prevalent in children now than it ever has been before in history. And we link it back to 90% of it comes from our environment.
Yeah.
And if we're spending 90% of our time indoors, and that is coming from a presentation that I've seen you deliver, that, my goodness, we like, this is an education and awareness issue as well.
Yeah. I mean, that figure of 90% is an average figure, which means people are spending more than 90% in buildings. But when you think about it, the other 10% we're spending in the space between buildings, you know, in the public realm. So yeah, there's a big issue. Many people just don't get out into countryside. So when we're talking about reconnecting with nature, it's not as easy as looking out a window or going for a walk. Yeah, it's, many people just cannot do that. And I think sadly that came to light during the lockdown. And it also highlighted some of the bad construction, you know, residential construction that we're doing. We've isolated people away from nature, from the outdoors, and daylight and fresh air and all the other things. So many people said that the next wave after COVID will be a mental health wave, because we shut ourselves away. And I don't know about yourself, Neil, but we're very fortunate here to live in the countryside. We can walk out the door and be in a fantastic country. And during lockdown, we've been exploring the local area, really enjoyed it. And we've been able to take the time to slowly watch spring emerge. And that is fascinating. Other people have been locked indoors and haven't seen that.
Yeah, what that brings up for me is that there's a big emergence of biophilic design. And if we are still, you might have some houseplants, you might have some nice natural light and the play of shadows in an urban dwelling or an urban office. Are we still, what do you see as the implications of that? Are we achieving what we're setting out for with biophilia?
That's a very, very interesting question. Probably not. I love biophilia. I think it's wonderful, and we need to find much more of it. But it's like sustainability. It's a word which is coming to mean put a plant in the corner of the office, unfortunately. And I think when we go back to biophilia being love of life, so if we create biophilic buildings, those buildings themselves should be loving life and have natural patterns and being able to experience natural changes in air temperature and and wind movement or air movement within the building, and also be able to experience the fresh airs, etc. Many of our buildings, although we call them biophilic, don't do that. They might have a living wall there somewhere. And I know one of your previous guests, Sonia Bocart, fantastic views on biophilia. And we were just talking this week about doing a co-presentation for UK primary schools. And you think, why in 2020 are we still thinking that we should be bringing nature into primary schools? We should have been asking this question a long time ago. I think we have a long way to go with biophilia. But saying that, there are some fantastic projects which are in development and actually existing, which are truly biophilic. So,
and I don't mean to denigrate biophilia and the movement by
no, not at all. No.
What? And I don't think you do either.
No. There is another issue though on biophilia, that it seems to be for those who can afford it at the moment. So I think that there needs to be a movement of affordable biophilia, as we have affordable housing, affordable foods, etc.
I have 2 points there. And this comes from Europe directly, but it certainly is not limited to Europe. But a lot of people tell us with our work in the transactional side of real estate, that, you know, I can't afford what you're talking about, to integrate nature into my life and all that. But I lived in Eastern Europe for 2.5 years, and because of the poverty rates, they had to have gardens that literally went from property line to property line, and they had to be quite self-reliant, and they not only encouraged it, but they needed to embrace those natural systems and to subsist. And then there's an architect here, at least in Oregon, named Paula Baker Laporte. And she's a phenomenal, more of an eco builder or eco designer with EcoNest. And she mentioned something that has really stuck with me, is that in an urban environment, we have so many synthetic materials that the ions, the negative ions that we need to actually make us feel at peace and boost our immune systems, they cling to these surfaces. And so we may have biophilic buildings that allow light and air and encourage a love of life, but we're still living in a shadow of an environment that actually rejuvenates us biologically.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, all these things come together, and it's quite a complex picture, isn't it? But you know, we can have biophilic projects because we've got nice green walls and we've got nice textures, brick walls or natural timbers. But we just fill it with furniture, which off gas. It's got loads of formaldehyde and fire retardants in there, and we don't necessarily see that connection. Which is why I love the expression, the living buildings. The whole thing is a living entity, an ecosystem. And I love the way that ILFI use the expression of inhabitants, of people inhabit a space rather than occupy or end users or our residents. Those are passive terms, but by being an inhabitant, you're living in that space. You are part of it. You're responsible for it, and you react with it.
It makes me think of Frank Lloyd Wright, and at least that he would build furniture into his buildings and his houses. Do you think that we're going to start seeing more living furniture in our spaces that are either third party to the design or actually designed into our spaces?
Yeah, I guess we are to a certain extent already with IKEA, moving from sort of a furniture organization into doing small homes, and using creative approaches to small spaces, etc. But yeah, I think the biophilic, the red listings we've been talking about, we will apply to the furniture that we're buying. And that's another sort of a tipping point, isn't it? That's still within that long tail. If we can get all those little individual purchases to be regenerative, then we're on the right track.
Martin, this is amazing. What I want to do is I want to take the time to highlight to our audience what you have going on. I mean, you mentioned just in this podcast that you've got the first IFLI European conference coming up. But what you seem to be an organizer of a lot of different events and movements. What are you really looking forward to right now?
We have a number of things happening, and what I'm looking forward to, there's a series of which we've called Zoom Regenerative, which starts again next week. And Zoom Regenerative is something started back in the lockdown, and in part it was based on reading an article by Arundhati Roy, which talked about the pandemic as being a gateway, a portal into a new world. We need to work out what we're going to leave behind and take through that portal into a new world. And a number of people I had working with, mentors, say, well, what's actually happening in the world in terms of regenerative design, regenerative thinking? So we started Zoom Regenerative, which is on Zoom, hence the name, which was a weekly, the format, just by bringing voices from around the world. And that's been wonderful. And I've learned a hell of a lot from that, being able to reach out to colleagues from New Zealand through to Costa Rica, and bring all those together. It's been pretty amazing. And the call I had this afternoon was from Costa Rica with Victor Montero. And he's going to host the first one of our third series, which will be edition 17, with a Latin American special. So in terms of looking forward, that's one I'm really excited about.
Can anybody join those calls?
Yes, we can. Yeah. I think if you just did a search for Zoom Regenerative across Twitter in particular.
Oh, excellent. I will be sure to post that in our show notes as well.
Yeah, cheers. And then across the EU, we've been running an EU-funded regenerative action, cost action, called Restore, which is rethinking sustainability towards a regenerative economy. And this is with Carlo Battisti down in Italy. Carlo's the chair, I'm the vice chair. We have about 160 members in this group. And I think we've all European countries and a few partners like America, like New Zealand, and others. Over the 3-4 years, we've been running a number of workshops. We've been running working groups, training schools, conferences, etc. And one thing I'm looking forward to, and at the same time not looking forward to, is our final conference at the end of the 4 years, which all being well will be in Paris in December. All being well because of COVID, etc. The day before that, we're bringing together the ILFI ambassadors across Europe. So day one will be the first Living, Build and Challenge conference in Europe, probably outside of the States, but they've probably done something down in Australia. So I'll put a caveat there. So really looking forward to those 2 days. And then coming out of the Restore project, there's so many good publications and material. And we're now looking at final disseminations. And one of those pieces of work which really that does inspire me and say, okay, well, let's imagine a city 10 years into the future. And starting from now, starting from this pandemic, where we have a clean slate and a new opportunity to do things. What if a city was to apply all the good regenerative thinking that we know today? What would that city look like in 10 years' time? So we've called that city Restored 2030. And so there's a piece of work going on with those researchers just to reimagine that city. And we're still working on it, but that's quite exciting. And it is somebody who pointed out, well, if that city's got all those things right on health and well-being and lack of toxic materials and the right space in between buildings, all that stuff, maybe they could counter another pandemic, should there be one, or be better prepared for those sort of things. So that the future for all that is exciting. So watch out for Restored 2030.
Restore 2030. I'm going to put that on our radar. All these things I am going to link in our show notes. And what I really applaud is the power of asking generative questions about what could be.
Yeah.
And if we already have the mindset and the technology and the ability to do these things, then let's actually mimic what's going on in natural patterns of disturbance. Out of disturbance comes rejuvenation and regeneration.
Absolutely. And this goes back to some of the concepts of regeneration. It's emergent stuff. It's fractals. It's edge of chaos type things. Nature evolves. It doesn't do everything on a linear basis. It doesn't do everything on a cause and effect. It compensates. It's always moving. But our approach, particularly in built environment, is of cause and effect. We do this will happen. It doesn't always happen. And I think we're now opening much more to that emergent and realizing what nature can teach us and help us in terms of designs. And I just the other day I was looking back. It is in preparation for this really. One of the things which inspired me way back in the 70s, listening to East Coast, West Coast music and things, was the Whole Earth catalogue. And I had a copy, and I love just browsing through there, where you could buy anything from chickens to houses to all sorts of stuff. And I lost my copy somewhere down the line. But in preparation for our chat, I thought I'd try and track one down on the internet. And in the very first copy, which I'm pretty sure is the one I had, it had a picture of the Earth on the cover. Buckminster Fuller talking about geodesic design. So this was, I think that was published in '68, and I was reading the early '70s. But yeah, we just come around full circle to those seemingly wacky ideas at the time, and now things were taken on board seriously.
Hopefully, our buildings don't leak as bad as the geodesic domes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Martin, this is an absolute pleasure. I can't help but think that you have gone through several different iterations and epochs in the built environment, and we cannot be here today. I cannot be here today without standing on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. And so I with that, I just really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I get so much inspiration out of it. And in our little corner of the industry where we do help clients buy and sell real estate, but we want to bring mindfulness and resilience into it. Like we could not even be having this discussion without you going through the work that you've done. So thank you so much for being an inspiration worldwide for us. And you're the first person in the UK or across the pond that we've had the ability to talk with.
Yeah, but thanks for those kind comments. But yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants is a brilliant phrase, and I've done the same. I've learned from so many people. A lot of those are through the ILFI, but then we mentioned Buckminster Fuller and all sorts of people who I think pick up those wonderful ideas. Stuart Brand with his Holders catalogue. Okay, it's planted a seed, and a number of decades later, I thought, wow, okay, we can move with that now. And that's brilliant. So many thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation, and also the prompt to think, well, why have I arrived? How did I get here? And that's an interesting question. So thanks for that.
It is my pleasure. All right, Martin, take care.
Okay, thank you.